From our original 4 questions that we have about Havas Misuteris, about the innate dormant love that every single Jew has in their divine soul, we're now going to be answering the question we labeled as question number 1, which is the root of this inherent love. So what is the source? What is the root? What sphera is most connected with this inherent love? And that is Chachma, or wisdom. So take a moment and look at this picture, okay? But don't label it. Just really look at it. What shapes do you see? What colors? What's the overall feeling of it? Do anything but label it as what it is. This is being in a Chachma state. Chachma is the state of openness, of expansiveness. It's this cognitive state before we actually label or something and put it into definition. That's more Bina, right? Chachma is compared to the letter Yud. It's that state of instant inspiration, that moment of expansion. And Bina is that hey, which takes the Yud and then develops it further. The Hebrew word for Chachma is actually, the root, the word Chachma can actually be broken down as to Koach Ma, which is the power of what is. It's an inquisitiveness, it's an openness, it's an expansiveness. It's being able to look at something and not needing to put it into a box, but being able to just enjoy the thing of what it is. And that's why children have so much wonder when looking at things. Because it's not like, it's a bird. It's like, wow, what is that? It's flying and it's colorful and all the details. And we have this power as adults also to be able to look at things and not just label them. And so often what happens is something doesn't go our way. And then we're like, it's bad, it's terrible, it's annoying, it shouldn't have happened. And we're automatically putting a label onto it and therefore closing that state of inquisitiveness. Versus if we could just say, interesting, what is this? Out of genuine curiosity, what is this? That's the power of koachma, the power of what is. Chachma allows an openness of experiencing reality without defining it. It is called the window to the soul. It's our ability to really go into life with a curiosity and an openness and be able to look at a situation without having to label it. And actually in Torah Or, the Alter Rebbe speaks about Leah versus Rachel. So Rachel represents the sphere of Malchut, which is revelation. That's when things come out in their beautiful packaging. It's just, you can see it for what it fully is. Chachma represents more the idea of Leah, which is being being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because when we don't fully understand an idea, it really frustrates us and we just want to put it into a box and understand it already. But the more we're able to just sit with an idea and not have to put it into the paradigms I have, but allow that idea to have its effect on me, or allow a new moment, a new experience to have its effect on me, the more I'm able to stay in Chachma, in that open state, the more I'm actually going to be able to gain. Meaning instead of just labeling this experience as this is bad and shouldn't be happening, I can say, what is this, right? Koachma, Chachma, what is this? And through that openness of it, right? So sometimes it's oh, this must be happening for this specific reason. We put something right back in a box. But if we're able to just sit with what is this and be open to Hashem showing us and open to that state of expansiveness, then we really get tapping into what Chachma is, which is a window to the soul. This is why the blessed infinite light can be expressed there in Chachma. Because no thought can grasp the infinite light at all. Therefore, it is best captured by precognitive, intuitive, and open qualities of Chachma. So we've talked about Chachma as bittul. Chachma is in a nullified state. It's a state of surrender, state of openness. And it's in that state of expansiveness of Chachma, that aspect of our being, that God's infinite light is most able to rest. Because if I'm already closed, if I'm already in a defined state, I don't have room for infinity. But because Chachma has an openness, that is the window to our soul. That is where God's infinity is able to shine through into our soul. That is how we have this Havas Misuteris, this innate dormant love. It enters us, this powerful love enters us through our Chachma of our soul. Right, so Chachma of our soul meaning referring to in the 10th sphere, the sphere of Chachma. And this is why even someone who isn't educated in Jewish philosophy or even intellectually doesn't agree with the ideas of Judaism has this inherent love, because it's not about your understanding. It's not about your cognition at all. It's not about your values. It's about an innate aspect of our being. It's about this Chachma, this wisdom, this godly wisdom of our divine soul that is always in the state of expansiveness and openness, and that the blessed infinite light is always there. And so it really doesn't matter how we view the world or how educated or uneducated we are, that Chachma always has the power to influence our entire system because it's above wisdom. So I know we're translating it as wisdom, but if you look at the aspect above Chachma being a das, is Keser. So Keser, I know this is terrible, but I call it a donut, okay? There's the outer part of the Keter, and then there's the inner part. The inner part, the jelly, is pleasure. And the outer part is will and faith, okay? That's the doughy part. And so that the deepest aspect of our soul, that's why I'm saying it's terrible to call, like, you know, the essence of our soul a donut, but it helps me visually. So that outer aspect of the donut, that keter, is where our will comes from, and our faith. And so that faith is trickling down into Chachma. And so this is not a faith that's based on intellect. It's not a faith that's based on, I choose to believe. This is not an emotional faith. This is a supra-rational faith. This is a God consciousness. This is a transcendence that is just divinely downloaded into our soul constantly through the aspect of our soul called Chachma, called that state of openness, that koach ma. So regardless of how someone's, more distilled Chachma or their Bina or their Das views the world, this Chachma has the power to override that entire system, as it's higher on the sphere. So when it comes to something graspable, some people can grasp something more than others, right? Depending on our intellectual abilities or our life experience. But something ungraspable, everyone can grasp it equally, right? We're all equally unable to grasp it. Meaning, if I'm like, the sun is so big, it won't fit into the palm of my hand. That's ridiculous, because of course it couldn't fit into the palm of my hand, and that doesn't actually tell you anything about the sun, right? Or if I'm like, this idea is so deep, I can't even carry it, right? It's just like it's using the wrong tool. In order for there even to be a distance between them, there has to be some kind of connection. They're just completely the wrong tool. My mind is never going to be the correct fishing net to fish out godliness, to fish orient self. It's not the right vessel. It's not the right tool. And so to grasp God with my mind is ludicrous. Because a mind is something that has no ability to grasp something that's beyond it, right? So the koach ma, the chachma, is where that aspect of infinity is drawn down, but still, my mind my cognitive mind, my actual thinking mind, my rational mind doesn't have that power. It's not the correct vessel to grasp godliness. There is a study done. They wanted to find the smallest fish in the ocean, and they used 3-inch nets. And guess what they found? There was only the smallest fishes in the ocean were 3 inches. Why? Because anything else escaped the net, meaning the vessel they were using to measure wasn't appropriate. To grasp godliness with my mind is ludicrous because the mind cannot grasp something that's infinite. And so therefore, when it comes to grasping God, we're all equal in that measure. All of our level of Chachma fail. No one is able to use their intellect there. We all have to rely on our faith. And once again, this is not faith that's below intellect, right? It's foolish to take something that is graspable by intellect and try not to understand it. Just say, oh, I believe. That's not I believe. That's unlazy, and I don't want to actually think it through, okay? But when this is just the fact that it's super rational. I've reached everything I can with my intellect. I've grasped everything I can with my intellect, and these dimensions of godliness are just beyond my intellect, so then I have to use the superpower called faith. So there's faith that's below intellect, and then there's faith that's above intellect. And this idea actually completely freaked the Greeks out. Because they were like, you're a nation of philosophers. All right, Jewish people, like, do your thing. Learn your Torah. But then they realized that we believe that the Torah is actually super rational, godly, divine downloads. They're like, wait a second. I'm sorry. You're doing mitzvahs that don't make sense to your intellect? That's insane. They couldn't handle that because they couldn't handle there was anything beyond our intellect. Because for them, intellect basically was their God. And so for us to acknowledge, yes, there's something higher than my knowledge. Yes, there are things that are beyond my power to grasp, and I can be humble to that, but through being humble to it, I'm actually able to transcend and be part of that. Okay, King David said, I was a fool without knowledge. I was an animal towards you, yet I was always with you. This is Psalm 73. And meaning it's precisely because I was a fool and an animal, using my faculty of faith and not reason, that I was always with you and connected to you. Meaning, if my relationship with God is only based on my intellect, so then when my life is going great and I completely understand why everything in my life is happening, I can rationalize everything, then I have faith. But at the moment something doesn't make sense to me, well, there goes all my faith, there goes my connection with God. It's true saying that my relationship with God is not based just on my intellect. I realize that this is a relationship with something way beyond me, and I'm going to be humble to that, I'm going to be open to that. They can always be with God. Otherwise, what kind of happens is like this childish relationship where it's like, God does what I like. Woohoo! God and I are best friends. Oh my gosh, you don't understand. Why is God doing this? What's happening? This isn't fair. This shouldn't be happening. So God doesn't make sense. So then the relationship's cut off. And then it makes sense again. All right, God, you're good, right? It's just like that drama in a relationship with God. So how can I always be connected to God? David Melch is saying simply, it's because my relationship was not based on my own rational intellect. Yes, I can use rational intellect to understand the aspects of godliness that Hashem wants me to grasp, but that is not the foundation of my relationship. We now explore the historical phenomenon of Jews who do not practice Judaism, of Jews who do not practice Judaism choosing to die rather than convert. So throughout history, if you want to read books on this, there's tons. There's just these crazy, amazing, saying crazy because on rational stories of Jewish people who were not actively practicing their Judaism. And if you ask them, that was not their value system. And yet, when faced with the horrible question of convert or die, they chose instinctively, automatically, die rather than convert. And so what is this historical phenomenon? You don't have to look that far back. You can read stories of Jews in Soviet Russia to see, I have a few books on it, to see these incredible stories of people who give up their life rather than convert, even though value-wise, during their life, they didn't value Judaism. So if someone wants to die for their values, we can understand that, because that happens. People die for their values. But if someone's saying, I'm going to die for something that isn't my value, we have to take a deeper look at what's actually happening there. So where does that drive come from to die rather than to deny God's unity? So that is our innate love. This is our inheritance. It causes a spiritual adrenaline rush. Okay, so just like the body has a self-preservation button where it's like, it's like, oh my gosh, if I do that one thing, I'm really going to put myself in danger, and that instincts kick on and it saves us. We have the same thing in our soul. Meaning what happens is that usually we tell ourselves, I could do this sin and I'll still be connected to God. Ruach shtus, right? The spirit of delusion comes along and tells me I can do what I want and I'll just be as connected as ever. And so usually that's what happens. But then there's this red line where I can no longer fool myself, where the spirit of delusion gets washed away. And that is when the soul's self-preservation button gets pressed. It's convert or die. It's wait a second, I'm actually going to be giving up my soul. If I convert right now, I'm actually giving up my soul. And so in which case the self-preservation of the soul is don't do it. And in which case it completely overrides the thinking and the value system of that individual, because the soul is in overdrive, right? Can no longer be fooled into thinking, not that the soul is ever being fooled. The soul knew the chachma of the soul knew the entire time. But the other faculties of intellect of that person can no longer be fooled, because when that, a spiritual adrenaline rush comes on, there's just pure clarity of not realizing that I don't want to do anything that's going to disconnect me from God. And so really it's a sobering moment. In that moment, that person realizes, wow, I actually have the power to disconnect myself from God. And no, I don't want to. Even if that means giving up my physical life, the soul is that's worth it for the soul, because the soul itself does not want to be destroyed. So in the next chapter, we're going to be exploring how we can tap into the spiritual adrenaline rush, not just in life or death scenarios, but daily, right? Meaning, what happens is that we have this, so to speak, arbitrary red line. God sets a red line saying, sins disconnect you from me. Mitzvahs connect us. And we take God's line and we push it, it's okay, but only that sin, right? Not for keeping Shabbos, that won't disconnect me. But I'll never speak Lashon Hara, we draw these arbitrary red lines, and we all do it. It's yeah, I can just do this one thing. I can just say this one rude comment. I can just ignore this one mitzvah, and God and I will still be fine. But when that spiritual adrenaline rush gets pushed, when our soul realizes that, no, I'm actually going to disconnect myself from God, and that spirit of delusion goes away, we're now able to, really activate our havas mitzvot, this innate love for God that wakes up, that flows through our hakama and wakes us up. So that's great for, do or die situations, but what about every single day scenarios? Can we harness the spiritual adrenaline run to help us serve God and reach this level of kikarov alecha that it's very near to us, it's within our heart, within our ability to serve God? So that's what we're going to be learning next.